Okay, now we're going to look at number 12. It's a fairly complicated conveyance scenario, hypothetical. So we're just going to read it through the first time. And it says Alpha leases to Frank with a 20% royalty. Alpha owns a tract of land in fee simple, that is surface and the minerals, of 100%. So we know that Alpha owns a 100% mineral interest and makes the following conveyances. First, A conveys to Baker a 1/16 royalty. Then A conveys to Carter a 50% mineral interest. A conveys to Dean 1/2 of interest. And then Alpha conveys to Edwards 1/32 royalty interest. And then it wants us to complete the chart and state what is Alpha's interest. So let me show you what the chart looks like. So they want us to first look at who the mineral interest owners are, then what the respective royalties are of each of these parties, and then this says royalty borne by or royalty created by, and we'll say who creates them. And there's a practical matter, I've added a column just so you'll know who is actually going to pay that royalty. So since the first column is minerals, let's begin with minerals. So we're going to start with A, who owns 100% of the minerals. And the first conveyance she makes us to Baker for a 1/16 royalty. Well, that's a royalty payment, not a mineral interest conveyance. So we don't need to do anything with that for purposes of the mineral ownership. But the next conveyance she makes is to Carter for 50%. So now A owns 100%, and she's conveying to Carter 50%, which means A will end up with 50%, and Carter will own the remaining 50%. So the next conveyance is A conveys to Dean 1/2 of interest. So that's 1/2 of the mineral interest. So A is conveying to Dean 1/2 of her interest. So A owns 50%. Half of that is 25% she's keeping, and the other 25% goes to Dean. And the next one is Alpha conveys to Edwards a 1/32 royalty. That's not going to have any impact on the mineral interest. It's just a conveyance of a royalty interest. So what we end up with is A has 25%, C has 50%, and Dean has the remaining 25%. So let's fill out the chart. We're going to start with A with 0.25. Then we've got C 0.5, and then finally we have Dean with 0.25. Note that Edwards and Baker got a royalty payment, not a mineral interest payment. So 50 plus 25 and 25 is going to give us 100. So we know that's correct. So next we're going to go on to the royalty section. We're going to see who owns what royalty interest. So let's go back. I'm going to erase what we did for the mineral interest because we've got that covered. But now we're going to look at A's royalty interest. Remember, A starts off with a royalty interest of 20%. That's given to her by the oil and gas company when she leases her property. But then A conveys to Baker a 1/16 royalty. A 1/16 royalty. So we're going to minus from 20% 1/16, which as a decimal is 1 divided by 16, or a 0.0625. So that means that B is going to end up with a 0.0625 royalty interest. And from the 20%, we're going to deduct this 0.0625. So let's go 0.20 minus 0.0625, which leaves A with a 0.1375 revenue interest, net royalty interest. So her current interest is now 0.1375. Then A conveys to C 50% mineral interest. So A to C, 50%. So what that means is we're going to take, oh, let me say this first. You always want to, as you go along with your different conveyances, you always want to make sure that the numbers add up. So in this case, we want to make sure that 0.0625 and 0.1375 equals the 20%. And you're going to want to do that with every calculation that you do, because you don't want to get to the end of your chain of title and then realize you've done an incorrect calculation and you don't know where it is. So we're going to do it for this first one. I'm going to show you that we're going to then calculate 0.0625 plus 0.1375, which is A's interest, and that totals the 20%. So we know our math is correct. We're doing fine. Then A is going to convey to C 50%. That means it's going to be 50% of this 0.1375. So 50% of 0.1375 is 0.1375 divided by 2, and that's going to be 0.06875. So that is going to leave C with a 0.06875 interest. And that's going to leave A with a 0.06875 interest. Then A is going to convey to D 1/2 of interest. So we're going to take this 0.06875 and we're going to divide it into, half of it goes to D and A keeps the remaining 1/2. So let's look at 0.06875 divided by 2. That's going to be 0.034375. So that means D is going to have a 0.034375 and A is going to have the remaining 0.034375. Then we're going to go to number 4. Number 4, alpha conveys to Dean. Oh, we just did, sorry. Let's do alpha conveys to Edwards a 1/32 royalty interest. So if we do the math, 1 divided by 32 is, 1 divided by 32 equals 0.03125. So that means E is going to end up with a 0.03125 and we're going to subtract that 0.03125 from A's current interest, which is 0.034375. So that's going to be 0.034,375 minus 0.03125, which makes A's interest this 0.00325. So if we're going to fill out the royalty section, that's going to look like B is going to have a point, we're going to come back to A, but B is going to have a 0.0625. Then C is going to have a 0.06875. Then we're going to look at D, and D's interest is going to be 0.034,375. And then we're going to look at Edward's interest. He gets that 1/32, which we said calculated to 0.03125. And that leaves us with A's interest, which is this 0.003125. .003. 125. So that's all the royalty interest payments. And then we're going to look at the royalty borne by. So who created each of these royalties? Well, Alpha's initial 20% was created by Frank. And then Baker's, what was his? 1/16th, I believe. Baker's 1/16th. That's going to be, that was created by Alpha. And then Carter's 0.06875 interest, that was created by Alpha. Dean's 0.034375 is created by Alpha. And then Edwards 0.03125 is created by Alpha. Now in reality, what's going to happen is Frank is going to pay all these royalty payments. Even though Alpha created them, Frank is going to be the one to be paying all those royalty payments. So Frank's going to be paying them. So this is what your chart would end up looking at. For the minerals, Alpha has a 0.25, Carter has a 50% or 0.5, and Dean has a 0.25. For the royalties, Alpha has a 0.003125, Baker has a 0.0625, Carter has 0.06875, Dean has 0.034375, and then Edwards has a 0.03125. And then the royalties are borne by Frank created the first one and Alpha created the remainder, but in actuality Frank is going to be the one making the ultimate payments, or making the actual payments. Okay, so I hope this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions about it, I would suggest you just watch it again, because it is a bit of a complicated scenario. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's helpful, and I thank you for your time.